There are stories that shock us because of their violence, and there are stories that disturb us because of their silence. This is one of those stories, a story of a quiet home in Colorado, a neighborhood where the grass was trimmed, the porch lights glowed warmly in the evenings, and families waved to each other on their morning walks. A story of smiles on social media, vacation photos, birthday parties, and I love you texts. A story that, on the surface, looked like happiness. But beneath that image, something fragile was breaking. This is the story of Chris Watts. A story not defined solely by what happened, but by what led up to it. The calm, the cracks, the unspoken distance, and the choices that changed everything. And perhaps most tragically, a story of a family that once existed in laughter, love, and hope. We begin not with the ending, but with the life that came before. Christopher Watts and Shanann met like many couples do, through simple circumstances that never seemed extraordinary at the time. Two people crossing paths, unaware of how deeply their lives would become intertwined. Shanann was bright, lively, warm. She was someone who believed in trying hard, loving boldly, and giving everything she had. She had dreams, plans, and a way of making others feel included. Her life had not always been easy, but she carried herself with determination. Chris, on the other hand, was reserved, quiet, the calm opposite to her animated presence. He didn't need to be the center of attention. He didn't chase the spotlight, and in that balance, one expressive, one steady, they found connection. They built a life together, a home, a routine, a rhythm. Soon their family grew. Two beautiful daughters, Bella and Celeste. Bright, curious, joyful. The kind of children whose laughter fills a house with meaning. Pictures and videos from those years show moments many families know well. Birthday candles, first days of school, small hands reaching for bigger ones. Their home looked like love, and for a long time, it was. But life has a way of shifting, sometimes quietly, sometimes in ways we don't see until much later. As their family grew, so did responsibilities, bills, work schedules, daily routines. The kind of things that slowly shape the emotional landscape of a household. Shanann began working harder, providing, managing, organizing. Chris continued his job, steady and predictable, but something else was happening beneath the surface. Communication, the invisible thread holding relationships together, began to loosen. Not all at once, not dramatically, but gradually. Shared laughter became shorter, conversations thinner. Moments of warmth replaced with silence. On social media, they still look like a family in harmony. Pictures of vacations, family gatherings, smiles. But pictures don't always show feelings. Posts don't reveal quiet nights. Likes and comments don't tell us what two people are struggling to say to each other. Distance does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it slips in quietly, unnoticed. And neither of them could fully see how wide that distance would eventually become. There are moments in every story when something changes. For Chris, it happened quietly. A shift in attention, a new emotional focus, a desire for something that felt lighter, simpler, easier. For Shanann, the changes were felt, but not always understood. She reached out, she tried to talk, she planned, she hoped. But when two people no longer share the same emotional space, conversations become harder. Misunderstandings become sharper. Effort begins to feel uneven. Yet through it all, she continued loving her family. She continued believing in what they had built. She continued trying. This part of the story is not about fault or blame or judgment. It is about the human truth that relationships are fragile, that silence can be louder than arguments, That emotional distance can grow even when people still live under the same roof. And sometimes, the hardest part is realizing too late how far things have drifted. This story does not move quickly. It unfolds slowly because real life happens slowly. We take a moment here, not to sensationalize, but to understand. What happened next came from choices, from emotion, from fear, from confusion, and from moments where help was needed but never reached. In the days leading up to August 13th, 2018, the family's schedule followed a familiar pattern. Shanann traveled for a brief work trip with colleagues. Chris remained at home with the children. There was communication, texts, calls, updates, but the tone between them had noticeably shifted. On the evening of August 12th, Shanann returned home from her trip. It was late, around 1:48 a.m., when a friend dropped her off at the house. It was quiet. The neighborhood was dark. Nothing appeared unusual from the outside. The next morning, August 13th, events moved quickly. Later that day, Shanann missed a doctor's appointment. This was unlike her. She also stopped responding to calls and text messages. A close friend, noticing something was wrong, began reaching out. With no response, she drove to the Watts home and knocked on the door. No answer. She contacted Chris, who was at work, and then she contacted law enforcement for a welfare check. Soon, police officers arrived at the house. They knocked. No response. When Chris returned home, officers entered the residence and looked through the rooms. Inside the house, they found Shanann's purse, her phone, her medication, the children's belongings, but no sign of Shanann, Bella, or Celeste. This moment marked the beginning of a community-wide search, one that would soon draw national attention. Chris stood outside his home, speaking with neighbors, friends, and police. He stated that he had last seen Shanann early that morning. They had discussed their relationship. When he left for work, she and the children were at home. Local news stations soon arrived. Chris agreed to be interviewed on camera. His statements were calm. He asked for their safe return. He spoke of hope that they would come back. But investigators continued gathering information, reviewing movements, timelines, and communications. One key detail emerged quickly. A neighbor's security camera across the street had recorded the Watts driveway early that morning. The footage showed Chris backing his work truck into the garage, an unusual action for him. This detail drew attention. As hours passed, investigators gathered. Text messages, phone records, GPS data, surveillance video, statements from friends and coworkers. The timeline began to narrow. Shanann did not leave the home with the children. There were no records of travel, no evidence of a planned departure. At this stage, investigators conducted a polygraph test. Chris participated. When asked key questions about the location of his family, the test results indicated deception. Following this, investigators spoke with him again in a private interview. This interview continued for hours. Eventually, during questioning, Chris disclosed information about the events that occurred in the home that morning. The investigation moved rapidly. Information led authorities to a work site where Chris had been that day, property associated with the oil company where he was employed. Search teams were immediately deployed. At this site, Shanann was located. Bella and Celeste were located nearby. The recovery was handled with care and formal procedure. The site was secured, evidence documented, family notified. The case shifted from a missing person search to a criminal investigation. Chris Watts was taken into custody. Charges were filed, including first-degree murder, unlawful termination of a pregnancy, tampering with physical evidence. The court process proceeded without a trial. Chris entered a guilty plea. This decision meant the case would not go to extended litigation, witness testimony, or cross-examination in court. He was sentenced to multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. He was transferred to a correctional facility to serve the remainder of his sentence. This case prompted national discussions about family dynamics, early warning signs, support systems, mental health resources. The difference between public image and private strain. It became a reminder that lives seen from the outside may not reflect the reality inside. Today, family and friends remember Shanann for her dedication, energy, and care. Bella for her gentle spirit. Celeste for her bright personality, and the unborn child whose life was cut short. This story, above all, is a remembrance of a family. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share.